Have you ever noticed something strange about outrage? The exact same thing that can happen to two different people, and the reaction completely changes depending on who those people are. One person gets mistreated, everyone is furious, news spreads, people post about it, arguments start, statements get made, everybody suddenly cares. Then a few weeks later, something similar happens to someone else, maybe even worse. And almost nobody says anything. No outrage, no hashtags, no emotional speeches, nothing. And every time I notice this, I end up feeling uncomfortable because I don't think it's just a political problem. I think it's a human problem. I think most of us like to believe we care about fairness. We like to think we are guided by principles. We imagine that if something is wrong, we will recognize it as wrong no matter who it happens to. But real life doesn't seem to work that way. In reality, our empathy often comes with conditions. Not always, but more often that we would like to admit, because humans are tribal creatures. We have always been tribal, long before political parties, long before social media, long before present modern day culture. We naturally separate the world into groups: my people, your people, people like me, people unlike me. And once that happens, something strange starts happening to our perceptions. When someone from our group suffers, it feels personal. When someone from another group suffers, it feels distant. Not because we are evil, but because our brains don't experience those events the same way. I notice this online all the time. People aren't really reacting to what happened, they are reacting to who it happened to. And honestly, I don't think I am completely above this either. That's probably the uncomfortable part. It's easy to point at strangers on the internet and call them hypocrites. It's harder to ask whether we are doing the same exact thing, maybe just smaller ways, because selective outrage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent. Sometimes it's a story we ignored, the headlines we scrolled past, the victims we don't remember, the tragedies we never learnt about, the suffering that somehow never reaches our emotions. And social media makes this even worse because social media doesn't reward consistency. It rewards engagement, it rewards identity, it rewards belonging. If a story supports the narrative of your group, people amplify it. If a story complicates that narrative, people avoid it, not necessarily consciously, but it happens. And after a while, everybody starts living in completely different realities. One group sees one set of victims and another sees another set. Everybody is angry. Everybody thinks they are defending justice. Everybody thinks they are the compassionate side. And somehow the compassion becomes selective, which is weird when you think about it, because suffering itself isn't political. Pain doesn't have a political party. Fear doesn't have an ideology. Grief doesn't belong to a team. A person crying after losing someone they love looks exactly the same regardless of what group they belong to. But somewhere along the way, we started treating empathy like a membership card, as if some people qualify more than others. And maybe that's because outrage isn't always about helping victims. Sometimes outrage is about identity. Sometimes it's about showing people which side you are on. Sometimes it's about proving loyalty to your tribe. Again, I don't think this is something only other people do. I think it's something humans do. I think we are all vulnerable to it because being objective is hard, being fair is hard, being consistent is hard, especially when emotions get involved, especially when our group gets involved, especially when our identity gets involved. There is the quote once I heard that stuck with me. The test of your principles is whether you still believe them when they are inconvenient. And I think about that a lot because it's easy to support fairness when fairness benefits your side. The harder question is whether you still support fairness when your side looks bad or the victim belongs to a group you dislike, or acknowledging someone's suffering complicates your worldview. This is where consistency gets tested, and honestly, I'm not sure most people want consistency. I think most people want certainty. Certainty feels safer. It feels good to know who the heroes are. who the villains are, which side is wrong, which side is right. But reality rarely behaves that neatly. Real people are messy, groups are messy, history is messy, and suffering is damn messy. Maybe that's why this conversation never go anywhere, because everybody is defending a team. Very few people are defending a principle, and those aren't always the same thing. I don't really know what the solution is. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe tribalism is just part of being human. Maybe we will never completely escape it, but I don't think there is value in noticing it. The next time you see a story that makes you angry, it might be worth asking yourself a question. Would I feel the same way if the people involved were different? Would I still care? Would I still call it wrong? Or is a part of my outrage coming from who the victim is and who the offender is? I don't ask that because I think I am better than anyone else. I ask it because I genuinely don't know. And the older I get, the more I realize that consistency is probably harder than intelligence, harder than knowledge, harder than winning arguments, because consistency requires something most of us struggle with: the willingness to see suffering as suffering even when it doesn't belong to our side.